I saved my son, but now I regret it. The water was so still that day, like a sheet of glass reflecting the cloudless sky. Ethan, all elbows and knees at 7, was chasing a dragonfly near the edge of the pond. I'd packed a picnic ham sandwiches, apple slices, the works. Mark was supposed to be there too, but a last-minute meeting at the school had kept him. I was watching Ethan, I swear I was. But a text came through from my sister, something about her car breaking down, and I glanced down at my phone for maybe 5 seconds tops. When I looked up, Ethan was gone. The water was still, too still. My heart slammed against my ribs. I scrambled to the edge, my medical training kicking in, silencing the rising panic. The pond wasn't deep, maybe 5 feet at its center, but the bottom was thick with mud and weeds. I saw a flicker of blue his shirt. Without thinking, I plunged in. The water was shockingly cold, stealing my breath. I fought through the clinging weeds, my hands reaching, grasping. I found him. He was limp, his eyes closed, his face pale. I hauled him out, my arms burning. He wasn't breathing. I laid him on the grass, tilting his head back, pinching his nose. 2 breaths. Nothing again, still nothing. My hands trembled. Years of training, countless CPR certifications, and this was my son. I started compressions, pressing hard on his small chest. "Come on, Ethan, come on," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. My arms ached, my breath ragged. Then a cough, a weak, sputtering cough. Water gurgled from his mouth. He gasped, his eyes fluttering open. Relief flooded me, so intense it almost buckled my knees. I held him close, rocking him, burying my face in his wet hair. The paramedics arrived minutes later, sirens screaming, but the worst was over. He was alive. That night, tucked in his bed, Ethan seemed fine. Shaken, understandably, but physically okay. Dr. Albright, our pediatrician and a family friend, examined him thoroughly and gave him a clean bill of health. "He's a tough little guy," she said, smiling reassuringly. Mark hugged me tight, whispering, "You saved him, Sarah. You're a hero." But that night, I couldn't sleep. The image of Ethan's lifeless face kept flashing in my mind. The crushing weight of his small body in my arms. It started subtly. A few days after the incident, Ethan was drawing in his room. I glanced over his shoulder and saw a picture of the pond. But it wasn't the pond I knew. The water was black, churning, and twisted figures lurked beneath the surface. "What's that, honey?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up at me, his eyes distant. "They're waiting," he said, his voice flat. Then he went back to drawing as if nothing had happened. I dismissed it. A bad dream, perhaps. Trauma manifesting in his art. But then came the stories. He started telling me things he couldn't possibly know. Details about our house's previous owners, obscure historical facts, things I'd never told him. One evening, he was helping me set the table. "Did you know Mrs. Davison died in the attic?" he asked, placing a fork beside a plate. Mrs. Davison was the woman who had lived in our house before us. She had died of a stroke alone in the attic. I had learned about it from the neighbors after we moved in. I had never told Ethan. "Ethan, where did you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. He shrugged. "Someone told me." "Who?" He just looked at me, his eyes empty. "I don't remember." Mark, of course, dismissed it. "Kids say the darndest things," he chuckled, ruffling Ethan's hair. He probably overheard us talking about it, but I knew he hadn't. The unsettling incidents continued. He developed an aversion to water, refusing to take baths or even drink juice. He started sleepwalking, wandering the house at night, his eyes wide and vacant. He would stand at the back door, staring out at the creek that ran behind our property. The same creek I used to find so peaceful now sent shivers down my spine. One night I found him standing there, barefoot in the grass, his eyes fixed on the water. "Ethan, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He turned to me, and for a moment I didn't recognize him. His eyes were dark, almost black, and his face was devoid of emotion. "They want me to come back," he said, his voice low and gravelly. It wasn't the voice of a 7-year-old boy. I grabbed him, pulling him inside. "Who wants you to come back?" "Ethan, tell me." He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he blinked and the blankness vanished. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and frightened. "Mommy, I'm cold," he whimpered. I held him close, my heart pounding. I started researching near-death experiences, searching for answers, for some explanation for what was happening to my son. I stumbled upon accounts of walk-ins, entities that supposedly take over the bodies of people who have died and been resuscitated. I knew it sounded crazy. I was a nurse, a woman of science, but I couldn't deny what I was seeing. Something was wrong with Ethan, terribly wrong. I confided in Dr. Albright, hoping she could offer some insight. She listened patiently, her expression concerned. "Sarah, I understand you're worried, but I think you're under a lot of stress," she said gently. "Ethan went through a traumatic experience. It's normal for him to exhibit some behavioral changes. We can explore therapy, but you don't understand." I pleaded. "He's not the same. He knows things he shouldn't know. He acts differently." Dr. Albright sighed. "Sarah, I know you're a good mother, but I think you need to consider the possibility that you're projecting your fears onto Ethan. You nearly lost him. That's a terrifying thing for a parent to experience." Mark was even less understanding. He accused me of being obsessed, of letting my anxiety get the better of me. "He's just a kid, Sarah," he said, his voice frustrated. "He's going through a phase. You need to relax." I felt so alone. I was the only one who saw it, the subtle shifts, the growing darkness within my son. I started keeping a journal, documenting Ethan's strange behavior, my own observations, my fears. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy. Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor, a woman known for her eccentric ways and her encyclopedic knowledge of local history, unknowingly fanned the flames of my paranoia. One afternoon, she saw me tending to the garden near the creek. She hobbled over to the fence, her eyes twinkling. "That creek's got a history, you know," she said, her voice raspy. "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart quickening. "They say it's a place where lost souls get caught," she said, leaning closer. "Souls that can't find their way to the other side. Sometimes they latch onto the living." I scoffed, trying to dismiss her words. "That's just an old wives' tale, Mrs. Henderson." "Maybe," she said, her eyes fixed on the creek. "But some tales are true. You be careful now." Her words haunted me. I started seeing things, shadows flickering near the creek at night, whispers carried on the wind. Ethan's behavior continued to escalate. He started behaving cruelly towards animals, torturing insects and tormenting the neighbor's cat. He had vivid nightmares, or at least I thought they were nightmares. He would wake up screaming, his body drenched in sweat, but he couldn't remember what he had been dreaming about. He also displayed moments of cold detachment towards me, a chilling emptiness in his eyes that made my blood run cold. Then came the incident at school. Ethan got into a fight with another boy on the playground, but it wasn't a normal schoolyard scuffle. Ethan had apparently shoved the boy to the ground and then bitten him. The school called us immediately. We were summoned to the principal's office. Detective Miller, a local investigator, was already there. The other boy was fine, thankfully, but the incident was deeply troubling. Ethan had never shown any violent tendencies before. He said Ethan acted like he wasn't himself, the principal told us, her voice grave. He said Ethan had this look in his eyes. Detective Miller interviewed Ethan, asking him about the fight. Ethan was withdrawn and uncooperative. He couldn't explain why he had bitten the other boy. He just said he didn't like him. As we drove home, I looked at Ethan in the backseat. His eyes were fixed on the passing scenery, his face expressionless. "Ethan, why did you bite that boy?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. "Ethan, look at me," I said, my voice rising. He slowly turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were dark, cold, and utterly devoid of any emotion. He was in the way, he said. His voice flat. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to Ethan breathe in the next room. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't let this continue. I crept into his room. He was asleep, his face peaceful in the moonlight. I stood there for a long time, watching him, my heart aching. Was this still my son, or was it something else, something that had taken his place? I reached out and gently touched his forehead. His skin was cold, too cold. I knew what I had to do. The next day I took Ethan to the creek. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the leaves ablaze with color. I packed a picnic just like the day of the accident. Ham sandwiches, apple slices. "Mommy, why are we here?" Ethan asked, his eyes wary. "I thought we could have a picnic," I said, trying to sound normal. We sat by the creek, eating in silence. The water was dark and murky, the surface undisturbed. "Ethan, I need to ask you something," I said, my voice trembling. He looked up at me, his eyes unreadable. Are you still my son?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Ethan, please," I begged, "tell me the truth." He stared at me for a long time, his eyes narrowing. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It wasn't Ethan's smile. It was something else, something cruel and alien. "Not anymore," he said, his voice a low, guttural whisper. My blood ran cold. I knew then that my worst fears were true. The thing that had come back from the pond wasn't my son. It was something else entirely. "What are you?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He chuckled, a chilling, unnatural sound. "I am what you made me," he said. "You brought me back." I stood up, my hands shaking. "I'm going to fix this," I said, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "I'm going to send you back." He laughed again. "You can't," he said. "I'm a part of him now, a part of you." I lunged at him, grabbing his arm. He didn't resist. "We're going back into the water," I said, my voice determined. "Back to where you came from." I dragged him towards the creek. He didn't struggle. He just smiled, that horrible alien smile. We reached the edge of the water. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding. Could I really do this? Could I drown my own son, even if he wasn't really my son anymore? But then I looked into his eyes and I saw nothing. No love, no fear, no humanity, just emptiness. I took a deep breath and stepped into the water, pulling him with me. The cold seeped into my bones. "This is for your own good, Ethan," I whispered. "For everyone's good." We waded deeper into the creek. The water rose to our waists, then our chests. I could feel the current pulling us downstream. He still didn't resist. He just watched me, his eyes gleaming. "Goodbye, Ethan," I said, tears streaming down my face. I pushed him under the water. He didn't struggle. He didn't gasp. He just sank, his eyes still fixed on mine. I held him there, my hands trembling, my lungs burning. I watched as the bubbles rose to the surface. I waited for him to fight, to resist, to show some sign that he was still in there, but there was nothing. Finally, I released him. His body floated to the surface, his face pale and still. I stood there for a long time, watching his body drift downstream. The creek carried him away towards the unknown. I had saved my son, but I had also destroyed him, and now I wasn't sure if I had saved the world or doomed it. I turned and walked back to the house, leaving the picnic basket behind. The ham sandwiches, the apple slices, unused. Mark was waiting for me on the porch, his face etched with worry. "Where's Ethan?" he asked, his voice strained. I looked at him, my eyes empty. "He's gone," I said. Mark stared at me, his expression slowly turning to horror. "What did you do?" he whispered. I didn't answer. I just walked past him and into the house, leaving him alone on the porch, staring out at the creek. I went to Ethan's room. It was empty, the bed neatly made, his toys neatly arranged on the shelves. I sat down on the bed and stared at the wall. I didn't know what to do, I didn't know what to think. I had saved my son, but now I regretted it. Because as I sat there in the silence of Ethan's room, I heard a faint whisper, a voice that sounded like my own, but twisted and distorted. "Thank you, Mother," it said. "Now we can truly begin." And then I knew. I hadn't sent it back. I had only made it stronger. And now, it was inside me.